The Arrow 3 air defense system, right? Also known as the Exo Atmospheric Hypersonic Anti-Ballistic Missile System, in short, known as Exo-Atmospheric Interceptor. Now that's a mouthful. Now I'll break it down in chewable chunks, right? When we speak of an exo-atmospheric, right, we speak of activity that happens beyond the atmosphere, right? So basically meaning activity that happens in space, right, in orbit, right? That's what exo-atmospheric um, mean, right? Now, hypersonic, right? Hypersonic basically means it's going to be dealing with speeds that are above Mach 6, right? Mach 6 stands at about 7,500 kilometers an hour. So any hypersonic activity occurring in space, right, will be dealt with by this system, right? Now, it's exo atmospheric hypersonic anti-ballistic, right? Now, before we explain anti-ballistic, we must understand what a ballistic missile is, or what a ballistic trajectory is, right? A ballistic missile, right, is basically shot from the ground. It is a missile that is shot from the ground straight to the sky, right? This ballistic missile basically gets out of the atmosphere, right? And then turns towards its target while in space, right? And then moves down to the target, piercing through the atmosphere to basically hit the target on the ground, right? So ballistic movement is movement that tends to escape, right? The atmosphere and re-enter again, right? It has that bending feeling to it, right? So that's a ballistic missile. So this system, right, it basically deals with ballistic missile activity that happens beyond the atmosphere, right? And it basically shoots down ballistic missile activity beyond the atmosphere, right? Now, it is called a exo atmospheric interceptor because it can intercept ballistic missiles, right, that move and maneuver beyond the atmosphere, and it can intercept satellites, right? Satellites move in a ballistic way towards beyond the atmosphere, right? And then sits there in orbit, but it's in space, meaning it is exo-atmospheric, right? So the Arrow 3, right, has the ability to shoot down ballistic missiles that have a terminal point, a turning point that is beyond the atmosphere, right? And it can shoot down satellites. The Arrow 3 has an operating range of about 1,500 miles, right? Which convert to about 2,500 kilometers, right? So the Arrow 3 can cover and protect, right? Quite a large area. The area is huge that the Arrow 3 that the Arrow 3 can protect. It also has an operating altitude, right, that stands at about 100 kilometers. So the way this air defense system works, right, is basically it shoots down missiles or objects at terminal phase. When we speak of terminal phase, right, when you shoot up a rocket, for instance, right, it starts from zero, right? And then it increases in speed and decreases again to zero, right? And then when you get to the terminal point on top, right, The velocity is zero, right? And when it changes direction and faces down, the velocity increases again. So the velocity can increase to um, very high speeds, right? Hypersonic speeds, if there is no interception or disturbance in the trajectory or the projectile that it's moving in, right? So the way the Arrow 3 works is that it shoots down ballistic missiles, right, at terminal phase, right when they are about to turn and face their target. So it shoots down um, ballistic missiles at that point. Now, the Arrow 3 missiles, right, do not contain warheads, right, because they solely depend on the amount of kinetic energy the missile has that it has gathered from the high speed and momentum the missile, the Arrow 3 has, right? So when you shoot the Arrow 3 to a ballistic missile, right, the the pure hit or the pure shock, right, or the pure what can I say? Yes, hit, right? Direct impact destroys whatever ballistic missile was sent out there. So you don't need to add a warhead or an explosive in front of the missile. In September of 2023, the German government or the German military, right, decided to procure or buy the Arrow 3 air defense system, right? The defense system cost about 3.6 billion US dollars. The Arrow 3 missile system is made up of four basic components, right? The first component is known as a ground based radar or a ground orientated radar, which has the following features, right? It has the ability to track and trace multiple objects or targets simultaneously or at the same time, right? It has anti-jamming capabilities, and it also has the ability to protect um, sensors that the system uses from outages. Number two, you have a component known as a battle administrative system, right? Or a battle administrative control system, right? This is where the system analyzes the conditions and the situations in the battlefield, identifying friends and foes, enemies and allies, and acting accordingly, shooting down enemies, right? And avoiding interceptions with friends and allies. And number three is known as the Launch Control Center, right? This is where you control how and when and at what speed and which missile, right, we tend to launch after analyzing what type of target that we have from the radar system, right? And lastly, right, which is number four, you have the actual launchers, right? The infrastructure which carries the missiles, right, and then launches the missiles after getting commands and after getting an analysis from the battle administrative system, right, which sends commands to the launch central system, right, and then touts the launcher to release some few, let's say, three Arrow missiles to shoot down a hypersonic ballistic missile, for instance. So when we speak about the Arrow 3 missile system air defense, right, system, we are fundamentally speaking of these four components working together.